building around Kelsey Mitchell that I took issue with, because you got a generational Jordan-like talent on this team in Caitlin Clark. The Bulls did not choose to build around Scottie Pippen. All right? Look, the Blazers weren't building around Terry Porter. They were building around Clyde Drexler. I mean, the Knicks weren't building around Anthony Mason or John Starks or Derek Harper. They were building around Patrick Ewing.
Before we get started, if you're fascinated by the real stories behind the sports headlines, the untold dramas, the shocking revelations, and the relationships that define the game, you're in the right place. Make sure you hit that subscribe button and tap the like button if you want more deep dives just like this one. It really helps us bring you the content you love. It was a statement that hit the WNBA world like a tidal wave, completely reconfiguring the landscape of an entire franchise in a matter of seconds. Indiana Fever head coach Stephanie White stood before the media and, with unwavering clarity, made a declaration that would ignite a firestorm of controversy. She wasn't just discussing strategy or outlining goals for the upcoming season. She was drawing a line in the sand. And in doing so, she seemingly threw the most transformative talent the league had ever seen into a confusing and precarious position.
Oh my goodness. This is rather interesting that Sue Bird has brought this up to Kelsey Mitchell in light of some of the drama from a couple of days ago when Stephanie White was very clear. And there was no confusion looking at anybody out there, including people on YouTube, that may think that was misconstrued, even though Stephanie White is the one that said these things. And I'm not going to go after specific YouTubers, because that's not what I do. But the idea that people weren't going to take...
The message was brutally clear, leaving no room for misinterpretation. The Indiana Fever's absolute priority, their central building block, was not the record-breaking, generational phenomenon Caitlin Clark. It was, according to the coach, Kelsey Mitchell. The fallout was immediate and brutal. Fans and analysts alike were left horrified, struggling to comprehend the logic behind such a staggering decision. How could a franchise presented with a once-in-a-lifetime talent, a player who single-handedly altered league attendance and television ratings, choose to relegate her to a secondary role? This wasn't merely a questionable tactical choice.
It was easy to see this coming, like clockwork, really, because Caitlin Clark and Kelsey Mitchell complement each other on the floor and off the floor. They complement each other on the floor as the most dangerous duo in the WNBA, the most fearsome backcourt. Clark's ability to control the game, shoot from deep, bring the defense out, dice you up with the passes, get to the cup. Kelsey Mitchell's ability to just score in microwave fashion, unstoppable, so fast, back cuts, getting up and down the floor, breaking you down off boogie moves. You know, together, it's essentially unstoppable. Even one or the other is unstoppable.
To millions of watching fans, it felt like a deliberate declaration, a war on common sense, a conscious decision to sideline the very icon who had brought a new level of attention and excitement to the sport. The debate exploded across social media and sports talk shows, creating a player dynamic drama that nobody saw coming, a controversy that would ultimately force everyone to question what was really happening behind the closed doors of the Fever's organization. The shock wasn't just about basketball strategy. It was about a fundamental misunderstanding of a cultural moment.
So what do you think, or do you feel like people sometimes just like overlook your leadership specifically and your impact on the team from like a chemistry standpoint, because there's just so many narratives? So like, do you think people are overlooking that?
I think that in a short, yeah. I think naturally, yes, because of the society, the social media, and how bad, people take the social media and abuse it in the wrong realm of light. And so I think that's one part of it. But I also think that
covering basketball teams is now abused.
Clark wasn't just a rookie. She was a tsunami of change, and the Fever's leadership appeared to be building a wall instead of a wave pool. This single comment created a rift that would define their entire season, creating an us versus them mentality between the front office and a significant portion of their own fan base, who saw the decision as not just baffling, but almost insulting to the intelligence of anyone who understood the sport. The criticism against Coach White's stance was swift and damning, and it came with a powerful historical context that made the Fever's position seem almost ludicrous. Critics were quick to point out the undeniable blueprints of success from every major sports dynasty in history.
Fever organization, I felt like at that time, there was a lot of, role playing that had to be, situated. I feel like, that when something that big or someone that big who has that much impact comes into something, there are a lot of adjustments that people have to make on the floor, off the floor, in the locker room, in the training room. Just a lot of stuff is a lot of moving parts. And I think the biggest part that I respected about Caitlin is that she never was bigger than the program. I don't know if that makes sense, but like, it wasn't like she wasn't trying to take over. It wasn't.
The Chicago Bulls, during their legendary run, never built their entire system around Scottie Pippen. The entire architecture of that team, from the offensive sets to the defensive focus, was instructed to maximize the unparalleled talents of Michael Jordan. The Portland Trail Blazers of the early 90s weren't built around Terry Porter. Their star, their focal point, was a high-flying Clyde Drexler. Even the storied New York Knicks of that era centered their identity around the dominant force of Patrick Ewing, not the supporting cast of John Starks or Anthony Mason. The comparison was stark and unforgiving. By publicly stating she was building around Kelsey Mitchell, Stephanie White was implicitly placing Mitchell in the category of a franchise centerpiece, a Jordan-level talent. This immediately framed Caitlin Clark, by comparison, as a complementary piece to Pippen.
About Caitlin is that she never was bigger than the program. I don't know if that makes sense, but like, it wasn't like she wasn't trying to take over. It wasn't. I don't know how to explain that. You know what I'm trying to say, though?
Yeah, no, I know what you're trying to say. It's like she knows who she is. She comes in. She's going to obviously do her part because that's what being a professional athlete is. But with the understanding of fitting into a team, making sure we fit, making sure we have chemistry. So it's never bigger than like the group
it's like
itself.
She wasn't trying to be bigger than everybody. Like within our locker room, she wasn't trying to be bigger than anyone else. And I think the way that her...
To a vast majority of observers, this was a fundamental misreading of talent and impact that bordered on the incomprehensible. How could a coaching staff look at a player who was shattering NCAA records and bringing a national spotlight to professional league and decide she was not the primary cornerstone? This wasn't just a minor philosophical disagreement. It felt like a catastrophic failure of vision, a misstep that could haunt the franchise for years to come. This wasn't about diminishing Kelsey Mitchell's immense talent. It was about recognizing the hierarchy of impact. It's the same reason the Lakers built around Kobe Bryant, not Derek Fisher. It's why the Patriot system, for all its complexity, was ultimately built to serve Tom Brady's decision-making. To ignore this foundational principle of team building was to ignore the very history of the sport, suggesting a level of arrogance or ignorance within the Fever strategy that left experts speechless and fans enraged.
In our locker room, she wasn't trying to be bigger than anyone else. And I think the way that her style of play, it ended up complimenting me, ended up complimenting AB. And so, like, the one thing I love about Caitlin, too, is that we all love basketball the same way. We all have our different styles of way of playing it, but the passion for it with Caitlin, when she didn't play compared to when she did play, remained the same. And, like, I respected that about her because it could have easily not been that way. You have people that come in and not want to do or buy in once it's not, or once it don't go their way, or once unfortunate things happen and you can't play and injury happens and you're not getting your body the way you...
Amid the growing public outcry, another key voice from within the Fever organization stepped forward, and her words only served to deepen the sense of strategic confusion. Amber Cox, a prominent executive with the team, publicly doubled down on the coach's controversial stance. She confirmed in no uncertain terms that re-signing Kelsey Mitchell was unequivocally the organization's number one priority. On its own, this would seem like a standard, even prudent, statement regarding a star player approaching free agency. But in the shadow of Stephanie White's earlier remarks, it sounded less like a routine front office update and more like a defiant echo of a deeply questionable plan. It began to feel like the entire Fever leadership was reading from a different script than the rest of the basketball world. A script that willfully ignored the seismic impact of the rookie sensation in their own locker room. This doubling down transformed a coaching comment into an organizational dogma.
Caitlin Clark, of course, longtime teammates at this point, relatively speaking, a couple of years into Caitlin Clark's WNBA career. Kelsey Mitchell is a free agent. I mean, that is a looming story for the Fever. So until she signs on the dotted line to return, that future remains at least part in question. You look, the entire league's future is in question when it comes to free agency for the most part. The Fever actually have more players locked up than most teams, considering Caitlin Clark is still on her deal, Aaliyah Boston is still on her deal, and Lexi Hull is a restricted free agent, meaning the Fever can match.
It was no longer one person's potentially misguided opinion. It was now the publicly stated mission of the franchise. This created a chilling effect, making many wonder if there was a deeper, more unsettling reason behind this unified front. Were they trying to bolster Mitchell's trade value? Were they making a statement about not being dictated by external noise? Or was it a genuine, collective blind spot regarding the unique nature of Caitlin Clark's stardom? Whatever the reason, the message to fans was clear. Your confusion and outrage are irrelevant. We have our plan, and we are sticking to it, even if that plan seems to fly in the face of all conventional wisdom and observable evidence. This rigidity created a wall between a franchise and its potential, a self-imposed obstacle that would cast a long shadow over every game, every interview, and every decision that followed. But just as a narrative of internal conflict and managerial incompetence was reaching a fever pitch, a stunning counter-narrative emerged from a place few expected. The players themselves began to speak, and what they revealed would completely shatter the manufactured drama. Kelsey Mitchell, the very player at the center of the storm, sat down for a conversation on the highly respected podcast of WNBA legend Sue Bird. The picture she painted was not one of jealousy, resentment, or a bitter battle for supremacy. Instead, she offered a glimpse into a reality that was far more surprising and far more compelling than any of the external speculation. The very existence of this interview was a statement. Mitchell didn't have to go on a legendary player's platform and address the rumors. The fact that she chose to, and did so with such calm and clarity, signaled that the truth inside the locker room was dramatically different from the chaos being reported outside of it. She wasn't defensive or angry. She was explanatory, almost bemused by the entire circus. This wasn't a player reading from a PR script. This was a veteran leader setting the record straight from a place of authority and first-hand experience. The interview immediately began to dismantle the house of cards that had been built by weeks of speculation, suggesting that the real story wasn't one of conflict, but one of adaptation and, surprisingly, mutual admiration. It was the first crack in the dam, and the truth was about to come flooding out, revealing a bond that would shock everyone who had bought into the drama. Mitchell spoke with refreshing candor about the immense adjustments that everyone in the organization had to make when a force of nature like Caitlin Clark arrives. She talked about the shifting roles, the new dynamics in the locker room, and the overwhelming media attention. But then she delivered the revelation that changed everything. She spoke directly about Clark's character, emphasizing with clear conviction that the rookie phenom never acted like she was bigger than the program. Mitchell explained that Clark wasn't trying to take over or assert dominance over her new teammates. Instead, she came in with an understanding of fitting into a team, of ensuring chemistry was built, and of making sure everyone was on the same page. This heartfelt testimony from a veteran, the player who had every reason to feel threatened or overshadowed, instantly vaporized the popular media image of a toxic ego clash. She elaborated on the subtle ways Clark showed respect, from listening intently in film sessions to deferring to veterans in certain situations off the court. Mitchell described a young star who was acutely aware of her place as a newcomer, despite her historic pedigree. This humility, according to Mitchell, was a key that unlocked the team's potential for chemistry. It wasn't a top-down hierarchy being imposed, but a bottom-up integration based on mutual respect. This single insight reframed the entire season. The struggles weren't due to infighting or jealousy, but were the growing pains of a team learning to incorporate a unique talent, a process that Clark herself was actively facilitating, not obstructing. This wasn't the story of a diva. It was the story of a disciple of the game, eager to learn and become part of something bigger. The revelations kept coming, each one more damning to the conflict narrative than the last. Mitchell didn't just respect Clark's humility. She adored her playing style. She pointed out how Clark's unique skill set on the court ended up complementing her own game perfectly, as well as elevating the play of Aaliyah Boston. She highlighted their shared, obsessive love for basketball, noting that Clark's passion remained exactly the same whether she was on court dominating or sideline with injury. This was a level of professional respect that transcended typical teammate politeness. Mitchell was describing a symbiotic basketball relationship, a partnership where their talents interlocked seamlessly. She gave specific examples, detailing how Clark's penchant for throwing full-court passes opened up easy transition buckets for her, and how her own ability to break down defenders one-on-one created open driving lanes for Clark. This wasn't theoretical. It was a tactical breakdown of a perfect basketball partnership. Mitchell spoke about their nonverbal communication on the court, a developed language of looks and gestures that allowed them to exploit defenses in real time. Off the court, their connection was forged in endless conversations about plays, opponents, and the nuances of the game. This wasn't just coexistence. It was a collaboration, a meeting of two brilliant basketball minds who recognized how they made each other infinitely better. The narrative of them being rivals for the soul of the team was not just false. It was the exact opposite of the truth. They were co-authors. Perhaps the most powerful moment came when Mitchell described her personal relationship with Clark. She didn't use the language of colleagues or even friends. She used the language of family. She referred to Clark as being like her little sister. She revealed that they often talked for hours about basketball, that they playfully trolled each other, and that a genuine, deep bond had formed organically amidst the chaos. This brutally exposed a stark contrast between the warm, supportive reality inside the locker room and the cold, divisive speculative drama being pushed from the outside. The true relationship shocker wasn't a feud. It was a profound strength of a friendship that nobody in the media had accurately reported. This little sister dynamic explained everything. It framed Mitchell not as a jealous competitor, but as a protector and a mentor. It framed Clark not as an invading force, but as a welcome new member of the family. This kind of bond is what championship teams are built upon. It's the kind of trust that allows for hard conversations and on-court accountability. Mitchell described inside jokes, shared meals, and a genuine interest in each other's lives beyond basketball. This personal connection provided the foundation for their professional success. When the outside world was screaming about conflict, they were in the locker room laughing together. This was the ultimate indictment of the toxic narrative. It wasn't just wrong. It was blind to the very human connections that were the team's greatest strength. On the court, the chemistry was just as undeniable as the personal connection. Together, Clark and Mitchell rapidly established themselves as the most dangerous backcourt duo in the entire WNBA. They were a nightmare for opposing defenses, a perfectly complementary pairing of otherworldly skills. Clark's unprecedented range, her genius-level court vision, and her ability to dissect a defense with her passing created open looks and driving lanes that simply didn't exist before. Mitchell's lightning-fast, microwave scoring ability, her explosive first step, and her knack for backdoor cuts and boogie moves made her the ideal running mate. Individually, each was a formidable offensive weapon. When combined, they formed an offensive engine that was, at times, essentially unstoppable. The proof was in performance, and the performance screamed harmony, not conflict. Statistically, when they were on the floor together, the Fever's offensive rating skyrocketed. Defenses couldn't key in on one without leaving the other exposed. If you double Clark, she'd find Mitchell for an open three. If you focus on Mitchell's drives, Clark would make you pay from a logo. They forced opponents into impossible choices, and their skill sets were so different that crafting a single defensive scheme to stop both was a futile exercise. They weren't just two good players. They were a perfectly engineered system of offensive chaos. Their partnership was the Fever's ultimate weapon, and every highlight reel play was a silent rebuke to the idea that they couldn't coexist or thrive together. Clark's transformative impact extended far beyond her direct connection with Mitchell. The effect she had on Aaliyah Boston, the team's talented forward, was nothing short of revolutionary. With Clark orchestrating the offense, Boston thrived, benefiting from a near telepathic connection that echoed legendary partnerships like Stockton and Malone. Clark consistently fed Boston the ball in her sweet spots, unlocking her full potential. But this symbiotic relationship had a dark side, a chilling testament to Clark's indispensability. When Clark was ultimately sidelined due to injury, the bottom fell out of Boston's production. Her numbers didn't just dip, they catastrophically fell off a map. The catalyst was gone, the engine had stalled, and the entire offensive system sputtered to a halt, powerfully underscoring that Clark wasn't just a scorer, she was a primary facilitator, the sun around which the entire solar system of the Fever's offense orbited. The numbers were stark. Boston's points per game, field goal percentage, and overall efficiency plummeted without Clark on the floor. The entry passes weren't as timely, the spacing was clogged, and the double teams came more frequently without the threat of Clark shooting. This wasn't a coincidence, it was causation. Clark's presence was a rising tide that lifted all boats, and her absence stranded every other player on the shore. This proved that the building around debate was moot. The team's ecosystem was already naturally built around Clark's unique abilities. She was a central processor, and without her, the entire system crashed, providing a data-driven, undeniable argument for her central importance that no coach's statement could ever negate. The burden of Clark's absence fell heavily on one person's shoulders, Kelsey Mitchell. In a display of sheer will and dedication, Mitchell attempted to single-handedly compensate for the lost production. She jacked up her own scoring, taking on an immense and unsustainable offensive load night after night. It was an aggressive, admirable, and ultimately heartbreaking effort. The physical toll became terrifyingly visible during one game where Mitchell, completely drained and in visible distress, had to be physically helped off the court by staff and teammates. This wasn't just a player having a bad night. It was an athlete giving absolutely everything she had until her body gave out. This incident served as a painful, real-time illustration of the immense pressure placed on Mitchell and the absolute necessity of the Clark-Mitchell partnership. The team could not survive, let alone thrive, without both of its stars functioning in their complementary roles. This moment was more than just a scary injury. It was a metaphor for the entire season. Mitchell, the player the organization claimed to be building around, was literally buckling under the weight of that very strategy when forced to execute it without her star counterpart. It was the basketball gods delivering a verdict on the front office's philosophy. The image of her being carried off was a powerful, silent protest against the notion that this was a one-star team. It screamed for help. It screamed for support. And most of all, it screamed for the return of her running mate, proving that their partnership wasn't a luxury. It was a necessity for the health and success of the entire organization. While the players were battling on the court and forming unbreakable bonds off it, a different kind of storm was brewing, one that would create a devastating rift between a franchise and its most passionate supporters. A massive portion of the fan base, particularly those who had followed Caitlin Clark from her college days, grew increasingly furious with the Indiana Fever organization and the WNBA itself over the handling of Clark's injury. The accusation was severe. The team was intentionally stringing fans along. For game after game, vague updates and hopeful prognosis led countless people to spend significant money on tickets with the explicit expectation of seeing Clark make a return. When she remained sidelined for an extended period, that expectation felt like a betrayal. The entire process felt shady and opaque, shattering the trust of a fan base that was ready to make the Fever the center of the basketball universe. This was another devastating relationship shocker, but this time, it was between the team and the paying customers whose patience had finally worn thin. Social media was flooded with stories from families who had driven hours, spent hundreds of dollars on tickets and merchandise, all based on optimistic reports from the team, only to watch Clark sit on the bench in street clothes. This wasn't just disappointment. It was a feeling of being misled for profit. The goodwill that Clark had generated was being burned by an organization that seemed to take that loyalty for granted. This created a cynicism that would be hard to erase, making every future announcement from the team subject to doubt and suspicion. They had broken the sacred trust between the team and its fans, and that is a wound that takes a very long time to heal. These trust issues quickly expanded beyond the injury report and began to color every decision made by the upper management and coaching staff. The series of fumbles, the controversial building around comments, the perceived mishandling of the injury, and the general lack of clear communication led many to wonder if the Fever leadership truly understood the historic opportunity they were holding in their hands. The team, with Clark at its center, had the potential to become America's team, a national draw with a dedicated, cross-country following. But given the string of public relations disasters, the question became whether the organization had the self-awareness and competence to actually embrace that role. The disconnect felt palpable, leaving fans to speculate if the people in charge truly grasped the magnitude of the moment they were in. It raised a frightening question. Were they capable of building a championship-caliber organization around a championship-caliber talent? Great players can be hamstrung by poor management, and the Fever's actions, however well-intentioned, consistently projected an aura of amateurism in the face of professional opportunity. The leadership seemed to be reacting to events rather than proactively shaping them. They were being defined by the narrative instead of defining it. This crisis of confidence wasn't just about one comment or one injury report. It was about a pattern of behavior that suggested a fundamental lack of the strategic vision required to steward a generational talent and the massive fan base that followed her. In the end, the real shocker of this entire saga was the incredible disconnect between the external narratives and the internal reality. While Coach Stephanie White's comments sparked a controversial fire, and the organization's handling of its fans created legitimate anger, the players themselves, led by Kelsey Mitchell and Caitlin Clark, maintained a foundation of genuine respect, deep friendship, and undeniable on-court chemistry. Caitlin Clark's own exit interview reinforced this, citing the team's friendship as the bedrock of their resilience through a challenging season. The sheer talent on the roster is undeniable, with Clark, Mitchell, and Boston all earning all WNBA honors, making the narrative of internal strife seem all the more preposterous. The truth is, they all like each other, and they all fit each other's games. The Indiana Fever's true challenge isn't its players. It's whether the management can finally, clearly, and effectively build a coherent strategy around the generational talent they are so fortunate to have, rather than sowing seeds of perceived division and jeopardizing the most exciting future in the league. If you made it to the end of this deep dive, you know the real story is never as simple as the headlines. We unravel the hidden dramas and expose the shocking truths that others miss. If you want to stay ahead of the curve and understand what's really happening in the world of sports and entertainment, make sure you subscribe and hit that like button. Your support allows us to keep bringing you the unfiltered stories. Let us know in the comments what you think the Fever should do this offseason. Thanks for watching.